Innumerable societies across the world have looked upon these phenomena, amongst others, and have tried to understand them through interpretation of supernatural intervention. Writing in the 19th century, Edward Bernard Tyler, widely regarded as the founding father of the anthropological discipline, identified this attempt at interpretation as the primary impetus for the development of what he termed animism, or the belief in spiritual beings. And in a famous example, Tyler suggests that the misinterpretation of dreams gave rise to belief in the existence of spiritual bodies. And he writes, when the sleeper awakens from a dream, he believes that he has really somehow been away, or that other people have come to him. As is well known by experience that men's bodies do not go on these excursions, the natural explanation is that every man's living self or soul is his phantom or image, which can go out of his body and see and be seen itself in dreams. The Tyler thought of animism as the minimum definition of religion, arguing that all systems of religious belief exhibit a common trait of some form of belief in the existence of supernatural non-physical entities, whether that entity be God, the gods, spirits, demons, or ghosts. This is fair enough, if a little naive, as an attempt at defining religion, which is an ongoing quest. But Tyler's theories must be taken with a pinch of salt, because they arose from a particularly turbulent time in the history of scientific and religious thought. Following the publication of Darwin's On the Origin of Species in 1859, in which he detailed his theory of natural selection, a seemingly unbridgeable gulf opened between the worlds of science and religion. Darwin's theory removed the necessity for a creative God, replacing it with an almost mechanistic alternative, essentially causing the development of what historians have termed a crisis of faith in Victorian society. Tyler sought to have anthropology perceived as a science in line with Darwinian evolutionary theory, and as such it was the ultimate goal of anthropologists to demonstrate the evolution of human society from the irrationality of primitive belief to modern rational Victorian scientism, which was of course the most highly evolved state of being. From this perspective, religion and other supernatural beliefs were seen as primitive survivals. So returning to his animistic theory, Tyler suggested that interpretation of the aforementioned phenomena as evidence for the agency of supernatural beings was founded upon an incorrect interpretation of the experiential data, therefore suggesting an inability on behalf of the so-called primitives to draw correct and accurate conclusions about the world. And he even went so far as to attribute the belief of spirit mediums as a delusional belief in the reality of their own performances. So he's automatically classing it all as delusion. So if this primitive interpretation of the world was wrong, and religion was a survival of animism, then religion too was wrong. There was a somewhat biased agenda at work, as the 20th century anthropologist Evans Pritchard explains. They, 19th century anthropologists, sought and found in primitive religions a weapon which could, they thought, be used with deadly effect against Christianity. If primitive religion could be explained away as an intellectual aberration, as a mirage induced by emotional stress or by its social function, it was implied that the higher religions could be discredited and disposed of in the same way. Tyler's view, however, was blinkered, at least as far as his public writings were concerned, where he failed to draw any comparisons between the widespread belief in supernatural beings that was permeating every stratum of Victorian society. Indeed, not all Victorian thinkers saw the crisis of faith as a call to bring down religion, and many were engaged in a serious and scientific attempt at examining the spirits. And it's here that we begin to explore the relationship between anthropological theories and those of the newly born field of psychical research, and where we begin to see the development of the two disciplines along parallel trajectories. Since 1848, the spiritualist movement had taken Euro-American society by storm. In that year, two young American girls, Kate and Margaret Fox, and that's actually three girls, but these two were the ones who were there at the very beginning. In a small, in that year, two young American girls in a small New York state town began to communicate with an entity they called Mr. Splitfoot. The communication was initiated through a simple code of knocks, so it's like 1 for yes and 2 for no. And before long, Mr. Splitfoot revealed himself to be a peddler by the name of Charles B. Rosmer, who claimed to have been murdered in the Fox family home several years earlier. And we see here quite clearly the most prominent interpretation of mediumistic communicators, that is, that they are the spirits of the dead. So before long, mediumistic performances became commonplace, and practices attributed to spiritual agency, such as table tilting and Ouija boards, were practiced in thousands of homes throughout America and Europe. By 1862, the first learned society had developed, whose sole aim was the serious scientific investigation of the claims of spiritualism. This was the Ghost Club. And in 1882, just 1 year after the publication of Tyler's first book, the Society for Psychical Research was established in London by the Cambridge philosopher Henry Sidgwick, the classic scholar F.W.H. Myers, and the psychologist Edmund Gurney. And the stated aim of the SPR was to investigate that large body of debatable phenomena designated by such terms as mesmeric, psychical, and spiritualistic, and to do so in the same spirit of exact and unimpassioned inquiry which has enabled science to solve so many problems. Unlike theorists such as Tyler and other 19th century anthropologists, the members of the Society for Psychical Research were not a priori averse to the idea of the existence of psychical phenomena. Indeed, their research has revealed, far from Tyler's notion that the interpretation of spirits as the cause of certain phenomena was primitive, just how widespread such beliefs were, even within Victorian Britain, believed at the time to be the epitome of modernity and scientific advancement. I don't know what's happening there anyway. Some of the earliest forays into a scientific study of mediumship phenomena were carried out by the physicist William Crookes, with the most famous of all Victorian mediums, Daniel Douglas Hume. In 1870, a full 12 years before the Society for Psychical Research was established, Crookes began experimenting with Hume in a purpose-built laboratory aimed at objectively measuring Hume's alleged powers. And much to the disappointment of the scientific community, Crookes concluded that Hume's abilities were genuine, and so suggested that his experiments appeared conclusively to establish the existence of a new force in some unknown manner connected with the human organisation, which for convenience may be called psychic force. So in these early experiments, Crookes gives no indication that he interprets the phenomena to be the result of spirit influence, but rather hypothesized the existence of an impersonal psychic force. The issue as to whether mediumistic phenomena are the product of discarnate spirits or of an impersonal force, e.g. some form of extrasensory perception or psychokinesis, has been one of the most frequent debates within psychical research, even up to the present day when it's known as the psi versus survival debate. Crookes would later go on to accept the survivalist interpretation of spirit mediumship after attending seances with other prominent mediums of the day. So the evidence that convinced him that it was spirits and not some other some psychic force was quite different, and came from people like Leonora Piper, who was a trance medium. The trance mediumship, as opposed to the physical mediumship of D.D. Hume, however, provides us with some of the most interesting information regarding the potential nature of spirit entities. Over the course of its early existence, the SPR investigated numerous mediums, but none more thoroughly than Mrs. Leonora Piper. Mrs. Piper would go into a trance state during which so-called spirit controls would communicate with sitters. Her main control called himself Dr. Finuit. Despite the efforts of psychical researchers such as William James, however, no record of Dr. Finuit was ever found in the records of the medical school Finuit claimed to have attended in France. And this led psychical theorists like Eleanor Sidgwick to conclude that these alleged spirit controls were really portions of the medium's own consciousness, somehow separated from her normal everyday waking consciousness. Eleanor Sidgwick argued that it was impossible to take the world of the spirit controls for granted. And other researchers have also come to similar conclusions about alleged spirit communicators. The journalist Joe Fisher, for example, became increasingly involved with a medium and her spirit team, only to be sorely disappointed to discover that despite the incredible accuracy of the spirit communicators in describing their lives and homes on the earth plane, he was unable to find any evidence of their ever having actually existed. So Fisher came to the conclusion that these alleged entities were hung with ghosts. And he writes, "No matter how I mulled over the range of possible explanations, I always returned to the premise that the voices and their distinct personalities were generated by mischievous and possibly malevolent discarnates. Their eagerness to communicate their concern for the medium's health and strength, their preoccupation with life after death and reincarnation, and the occasional admission that they missed the pleasures of incarnate life, all suggested humans who no longer had physical bodies, yet longed to live and breathe once more." And it's here that we begin to see similarities with the pathological condition known as multiple personality or dissociative identity disorder. Psychoanalyst Adam Crabtree defines the ID as a condition in which two or more personalities manifest themselves in one human being, and describes the disorder thus: "The ID is generally considered to be a neurotic condition rather than a psychosis or form of madness. the subject may, in all of his personalities, be perfectly sane, the subject neither to paranoid delusions, hallucinatory fantasies, nor irrational thought processes. So the similarities with mediumistic phenomena are striking, and psychical researchers have long been aware of the inherent difficulties in attempting to distinguish between the pathological and the potentially paranormal. The psychical researcher David Scott Rogo referred to this as the infinite boundary of spirit possession, madness, and multiple personality. So by the end of the 19th century, psychical research had established 4 primary interpretations of phenomena associated with mediumship. Phenomena were produced by discarnate spirits, produced by some form of psychic force, or ESP or PK. Phenomena the product of outright fraud, whether conscious or unconscious, and the phenomena were the product of mental disorders. So these interpretations have remained relatively stable over the past 130 years, with debates raging fairly continuously within the parapsychological community. I'm going to turn back to anthropology for a bit. In the 20th century, anthropological interpretations of spirit mediumship began to diversify, with some interpretations developing the ideas of pioneers such as Tyler, and others branching off in new directions. This branching off resulted primarily from a dawning realization that the evolutionist paradigm within which 19th century anthropologists had worked was inadequate and riddled with problems.